joining us again. I know it's getting late. I'm picking up where we left off in the conversation with pictures of practice of visible thinking in the classrooms that I have worked in and with the teachers that I've worked with. What are they thinking is the question that really was the provocation that took my initial journey through visible thinking to the museum setting, juxtaposing the self-portrait of Van Gogh. I was teaching a kindergarten class, and in order to, my attempts at enculturating the students into moving their own thinking forward, which was really my intention. I proposed the problem or the question, what is the reasoning behind Van Gogh to paint himself so differently in these two paintings? What would promote him to look at himself in such a way? And I went out to a garage sale, and I purchased very large posters of these two paintings, and I placed them inside of very big gold frames. And I brought them into the classroom, and I had all of the kindergartners sitting on the carpet, and the question was again, why? Why on earth would he paint himself in such different fashions on two different occasions? And they really sat down and thought about it. And my job through Project Zero and my exposure to the work of David Perkins and reading everything he wrote and really making a promise to myself that I wasn't going to give up and that if he could do this, I know I can. Because I was just so passionate about what I saw and the potential I saw within the physical thinking framework. So the children really took ownership of this. They took the paintings, they put them on the floor, and one little boy actually ripped the gold frame off of the painting. And at first we were just absolutely flabbergasted, but we asked, explain to us exactly what you're doing. And he said, I need to get inside the frame. I need to get inside of there so I can understand how Van Gogh is feeling. And these were very large frames. Now I use this little one just as an example, and this is our frame of reference or the point of view. The little boy took the frame off of the painting and put it on the very large carpet and sat in the middle of it. And he said, I'm going to pop out my eyeballs and I'm going to pop in Van Gogh's. And when I pop out my eyeballs and pop in Van Gogh's, I'm going to become him. And I'm going to understand why he painted himself this way. So I'm going to show you, so we actually were able to go to the museum the next few days, and this is a little boy that popped out his eyeballs and popped in Van Gogh's. And this is his visit to the Norton Museum and seeing the real Van Gogh. And again, he's going through the action of popping out his eyeballs and popping in Van Gogh's. But what he created for us, literally, was a very huge frame that would remain on our floor in our classroom, and the children would use it throughout the year anytime they had to step inside and see the perspective of someone else. So this really, like David's quote about how visible thinking, but there's a quote where visible thinking externalizes the process of thought so that children can get or anyone really can get a better handle on them. And the concept of externalizing that thought process is, for me, that metacognition, or the invisible thinking that's going on inside of us that we don't really have that chance to untangle or see or express, as Shari was explaining when she first initially put up that string and the children were putting their thoughts onto the continuum. When they're actually out there, when your thoughts are out there and you can physically move them around and see them, you can better get a handle on the way you think and how you think. And it was so powerful for me to work with Angela in the very early childhood years, because I was working with children that were 3, 4, 5, and 6. And these children really, you could literally see their metacognitive process of putting the thinking out and moving it around and then putting it back again. And the frame had allowed them that physical capacity to do this in such a delightfully simple way. And then again with our Van Gogh. Now again, this same particular kindergarten class, the conundrum was the story of the shoemaker and the elves. And this little gentleman had a real issue around understanding selflessness and why an individual would engage in acts of kindness that would put them at a disadvantage. And he really grappled with the fact that these elves came out in the middle of the night. They didn't even have clothes on themselves, yet they were so busily making shoes for this little shoemaker and his wife. Why is this selfless act happening? So this little boy actually got strips of leather and cord, and in order to get himself physically and mentally in a state that he could better grapple with how he understood these elves, he would sit in there and make these little shoes. And here you can see him doing that. And for him, it really set the tone and the culture in our classroom, where these other 5, 6, and 7-year-olds got to appreciate and respect the quietness and the sense of ownership of their own behavior and how they thought about the way they behave and how they interact with others. So for me and the students that I had the opportunity to work with and the teachers that I had the opportunity to work with in these routines, seeing how the child begins to own their own learning really is your motivating force to keep this going throughout the grade levels. And then the situation being when I felt very confident that I could definitely do this with the really young if we continue to perpetuate it. I was curious how I could plop into, say, a 5th, the 6th, the 7th grade and see if I could catch them in the middle of their elementary years and really instigate this way of thinking again. And then, was the frame too much for them to stand inside of? Could they frame their thinking in other fashions, but utilize this as a resource? So here is a middle school science classroom. And here we're looking, we began by, again with the work of Shari, zooming in and really spending the time to slow down and look closely. And my background is science, a lot of heavy kind of science. So we went on the cellular level, and we wanted to frame that red blood cell. Not like if you could sit inside of here and become Van Gogh, or you could become someone else and take their perspective, how vividly can you step inside of a red blood cell and take the ownership of that cell and the obligation to collect oxygen in the hemoglobin and carry that through the bloodstream? How well could a child do this? Would it be too far of a stretch? And we really found out, no, that this child, that's the reverse, I'm sorry. This child is zooming in on his own hand, as you could see here. And the beauty of this, through Project Zero, I also had the opportunity in the Future of Learning to meet up with Mary Helen Immortino Yang. And I really took a deep dive into her work and a great deal of the mind brain and how relevant it is to learning and how a student needs to be able to come to terms emotionally and passionately with their own learning and be comfortable enough to know that it's something worth learning that they need for their future. And now this particular child is really spending time looking at his bloodstream. Because the children tightened their hand and then they saw the vessels get blue and bulgy, and he's curious now. And now in a normal classroom, in the old days when I would walk in, the teacher would be extremely annoyed that this boy has the magnifying glass. The other kids are busy writing or doing, and that, what are you doing now? Okay, so we need, and Mary Helen and her work and research has helped me to realize that constructive internal reflection and that need for pause time and that need to really think about what you're learning and where it fits within the schema of what you know and what you need to know. And as our thinking changes and our learning changes, we want to create a culture where the children are comfortable to look at what they know, metacognitively, like to put it out and say, okay, I used to think this routine, I used to think and now I think. Well, I used to think my blood was blue when I looked at my arm, like this boy was thinking. I used to think that red blood, that it was different than, I thought the veins were different than the blood, because when I look at my arm it's blue, but when I bleed it's red. Why is it red? That's a huge question. I mean, that's a tremendously huge question with so much science wrapped in it, but for a kid to say, I don't think that anymore. Now I realize the blue vein really does carry red blood, but it's not red now. That's tremendous. But it's not enough for that kid to put it on paper or get a test grade. It's that child that needs to say, this is something I need to know. I need to know that when that blood is exposed to oxygen, it grabs it, and that's what makes it red. It becomes red because of the hemoglobin. So this child is monitoring what they know with the help of physical thinking, because it's externalizing that process and making it okay for him to say, that's old thinking, I don't need it anymore, I can get rid of it. But I'm going to keep the new thinking, and I'm going to keep what I need. Now, then I wanted to see if I could go to higher grades with this as well. Again, now we're in a science laboratory and we're dissecting brains. And I love this particular photo because it shows you, if you look into the background, you'll see these are 9th grade students. And the boy that's looking out the window. We instituted a program with the help of Mary Helen where the students would journal in their books at the end of each class, where they would dialogue where they are in their learning, what they intend to do next, and how they're going to revisit it when they came back. And this at first was a very daunting task. But then it became such a relevant piece of the children's own learning, where when I worked with Veronica, I wrestled with how ownership can really be a comfortable thing for a student. Meaning, well, I have 2 teenage boys of my own that are in now 9th grade and one in high school. So, 9th grade and 12th grade. And for them, they kept so much information through the system. They kept so much knowledge and information and things that really weren't relevant that they needed to unload and they needed to update. And when I spent time dialoguing with them and the students in my classroom, I needed a way to kind of frame for students how they can personalize this, make it a convenient disposition, if you will. And through the journaling at the end of the class time, this came to be, where the students would, this particular boy, again at the window, said, I have to go look out the window, and this is where he would go every day, to really kind of put these pieces together. This sheep's brain doesn't look a thing like what I expected. I was expecting it to look a certain way, and it didn't look this way, and when I'm looking for the insular, I'm not finding it. So whether he was frustrated or where he was in his learning, he knew that this was his protocol, his way of visibly making sense of his world, accepting what he needed to know, and moving away from what he didn't need to know. So it's a helpful tool, and as the culture of this classroom kind of gives you a feel of, the students come to see their learning as not an isolated task, but a communal task where everyone is in a different space. They don't expect their colleague to be exactly where they are, and they don't expect their colleague to go about learning in the same fashion they do. But the results of their work do get the same goals. So when you read through his little journal, he's pointing out that he needs that quiet time, that he needs to get rid of the thinking that doesn't fit anymore. He needs to get rid of the baby thinking and keep that new updated thinking. And he also needs that quiet space to do so, where he clears his head, he looks for evidence, he finds that through his own provocations and his own initiations. So that's pretty much what I have to share. Thank you very much.